Hi, first graders. I'm so excited that we get to have this time together. Soon we will be doing things where we actually can see each other and talk to each other at the same time. But for right now, I want to get us started on our read aloud. Every day I'm going to read a new chapter of one of my favorite books, Because of Winn-Dixie. So Winn-Dixie, the book Because of Winn-Dixie is about a little girl and a dog that becomes her very good friend. And it's funny, and it's sometimes it can be kind of sad, and we think about how people feel, and it's just a really great story about love and friendship, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. Um, every time we read a chapter, we are going to talk about some of the important vocabulary words. We're going to be thinking the whole time about how the characters feel and what is the important part of each chapter. And that's what this book is for. You have this if you picked up your supplies from school. You had this in an envelope. But now the first page is just a cover page, and we'll do that later. But after chapter 1, after I read today, you're going to draw a picture of what you visualized of what we really want to remember from chapter 1. And then we're going to come up with a title together. Today, I'll probably, I'll write my title. And then as we go, you can either comment or email, or when we start our Google Hangouts, we will talk more about the chapters then and the title that we can come up with together. So, chapter 1, I'm going to begin. There's no pictures in this book, and it's just called chapter 1. So that's why it's fun for us to come up with our own titles for every chapter. Now, if you've seen this book, if you've seen this movie, that's okay. The books are always better. But please don't watch the movie until we've read the whole book, okay? All right. So chapter 1. My name is India Opal Baloney. Her last name is Baloney, like the meat. And last summer, my daddy, the preacher, sent me to the store for a box of macaroni and cheese, some white rice, and 2 tomatoes. And I came back with a dog. This is what happened. I walked into the produce section of the Winn-Dixie grocery store. Now, friends, this story takes place down south in Florida. And the grocery store, like we have Cub Foods and Walmart, this grocery store is called Winn-Dixie. And the produce department, that's the section of a grocery store where you see fresh vegetables and fresh fruit that you have to pick yourself and put in little bags. So she's in the produce section, probably trying to find her tomatoes, right? Because that was one of the things on her list. I walked into the produce section of the Winn-Dixie grocery store to pick out my two tomatoes, and I almost bumped right into the store manager. He was standing there all red-faced, screaming and waving his arms around. "Who let a dog in here?" he kept on shouting. "Who let a dirty dog in here?" Can you imagine what that would look like in a grocery store? With a dog running around and the worker just like going crazy, mad, his face is red. At first, I didn't see a dog. There were just a lot of vegetables rolling around on the floor. Tomatoes and onions and green peppers. I think I know how those got on the floor. And there was what seemed like a whole army of Winn-Dixie employees or workers running around, waving their arms just the same way the store manager was. What do you think they're probably trying to do? Catch that dog? And then the dog came running around the corner. He was a big dog and ugly. And he looked like he was having a real good time. His tongue was hanging out and he was wagging his tail. What does that mean when dogs are wagging their tails? He skidded to a stop and smiled right at me. I had never before in my life seen a dog smile But that is what he did. He pulled his lips back and showed me all his teeth. Then he wagged his tail so hard that he knocked some oranges off a display and they went rolling everywhere, mixing in with the tomatoes and onions and green peppers. The manager screamed, "Somebody grab that dog!" The dog went running over to the manager, wagging his tail and smiling. He stood up on his hind legs. I could tell that he just wanted to get face to face with the manager. And oh no, but somehow he ended up knocking him over. And the manager must have been having a bad day because lying there on the floor, right in front of everybody, he started to cry. The dog leaned over him, real concerned, and licked his face. He gave him a kiss. "Please," said the manager, "somebody call the pound." Now, the pound, that's a place where stray animals or animals that are like doing something wrong, breaking the rules, they get taken to. It's almost like a timeout for animals or like a jail for animals. Not a place you want your animal to be. "Wait a minute," I hollered. "That's my dog. Don't call the pound." Is that really her dog? Why do you think she's saying that's her dog? Maybe she doesn't want him to go to the pound. All the Winn-Dixie employees turned around and looked at me, and I knew I had done something big and maybe not very smart. But I couldn't help it. I didn't want to let that dog go to the pound. "Here, boy," I said. The dog stopped licking the manager's face and put his ears up in the air and looked at me like he was trying to remember if he knew me from somewhere. "Here, boy," I said again. And then I figured that the dog was probably just like everybody else in the world and that he would want to get called by a name. So I didn't know what his name was. So I just said the first thing that came into my head. I said, "Here, Winn-Dixie." That's the name of the grocery store. That's a weird name for a dog. And that dog came trotting over to me just like he'd been doing it his whole life. The manager sat up and gave me a hard stare like maybe I was making fun of him. "It's his name," I said, "honest." The manager said, "Don't you know not to bring a dog into a grocery store?" "Yes, sir," I told him. "He got in by mistake. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "Come on, Winn-Dixie," I said to the dog. I started walking and he followed along behind me as I went out of the produce department and down the cereal aisle and past all the cashiers and out the door. Once we were safe outside, I checked him over real careful. He didn't look that good. He was big, but skinny. You could see all his ribs. He must not have eaten in a while. And there were bald patches all over him, places where he didn't have any fur at all. Mostly, he looked like a big piece of old brown carpet that had just been left out in the rain. So you're picturing kind of like a mangy, like a stray-looking dog. "You're a mess," I told him. "I bet you don't belong to anybody." She probably thinks that he doesn't belong to anyone because he looks like he hasn't been taken care of. He smiled at me. He did that thing again where he pulled his lips back and showed me his teeth. He smiled so big that it made him sneeze. It was like he was saying, "I know I'm a mess. Isn't it funny?" It's hard not to immediately fall in love with a dog who has such a good sense of humor. "Come on," I told him. "Let's see what the preacher has to say about you." Now, the preacher, that's her daddy. But a preacher is someone who is like the leader at a church. They give the message and they teach about God. And the two of us, me and Winn-Dixie, started walking home. Okay, now that's the end of chapter 1. it sounds like she's going to bring him home and see what her dad says about maybe she wants to keep him. Do you think he's going to let her keep the dog? What would you do if you just found a dog? Maybe she should contact, I don't know, someone to see if if he's a missing dog, or see if someone's looking for him. Maybe put up posters. See if someone, if he's a missing dog of somebody else. Do you think the preacher's going to let her keep the dog? I don't know. Now, this is where you're going to take and open up. This is a cover, so don't use the first page, the cover page. We're going to go to the first page here, and you're going to draw a picture of what that chapter would look like if there was a picture that went with it. Now, I am picturing, I don't know where my pencil went. Here it is. I'm picturing the grocery store. So I'm picturing the dog running around, and Opal is kind of standing there watching, and there's an angry manager. Get this dog out of here. Maybe there's other like store workers in there. Okay. Maybe I would draw in the background, I would draw the shelves and draw like different, you know how there's like apples. I could color those, and then I could draw more. Okay, I would draw more fruits and vegetables here. I would like to draw maybe some people looking like their faces are, oh no. And of course, we're going to draw Winn-Dixie, the dog, and Opal. Okay, but you do what you want. For the title, I'm going to write Chapter 1. Like this. But then I also want to come up with a title. Like, what would I call that chapter? It's a really important part to remember. Maybe just what happens. I mean, Opal met Winn-Dixie, right? She found a dog. So Opal is our main character. She's the girl who's telling the story. And I can tell that she's telling the story because she keeps saying I said, Winn-Dixie, come here, and we walked home. That tells me that the girl in the story is actually the one telling the story. She's the narrator. So I'm going to write Opal meets Winn-Dixie. Hi, did you find it? That's an outside game. Okay. And then I'm going to have fun illustrating that, just showing what I was picturing in my mind while we were reading together. Okay. All right. That's it for today. We will resume tomorrow with Chapter 2 and see what the preacher says when she brings him home. I miss you guys so much, and I love you, and I just can't wait to see you and hear from you and take this strange journey together. Bye-bye.